Welcome to the How Did They Do It Real Estate podcast. Have you ever wondered how people succeed in real estate and what steps they took to get there? If so, this podcast is for you. Your hosts, Seyla and Seyla Prak, interview top experts in the real estate community to share with you their real estate journey and how they achieved massive success. Our goal is to provide you with valuable real estate resources and to help you apply it to your own real estate goal.
Thank you everyone for joining today's episode of How Did They Do It Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Seyla Prak. Today, we have our special guest, Serena Holmes. Serena, prior to becoming a realtor, Serena ran her own multi-award winning brand experience agency called Tigris. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
At Tigris Events to close to 18 years. Under her leadership, she grew the agency to 10 full-time staff at the head office in Pickering, and over 2,200 part-time staff across the country. They won 18 awards and were nominated for several others in recognition of their work since 2014. Between taking courses and exams to obtain her real estate licenses throughout COVID, Serena was also going through rounds of editing her book, The Accidental Entrepreneur, which came out in October of 2021. In addition, Serena has experience investing in both long-term and short-term rentals, and now her focus is on private lending. So Serena, it's a great honor that you're spending time with me today. So thank you so much for coming on. So welcome to the show.
Great, thanks for having me.
So Serena, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I know you summed up part of it in the bio, but I ran my own business for about 18 years. I just sold the business last February. So it's been just over a year since I exited. I kind of fell into that by accident. I'd been doing events part-time throughout university and then had the opportunity to come on board as a brand ambassador, led into a management opportunity. And then I became a partner fairly quickly after that. And then the woman who actually founded the business ended up leaving about 4 years in. So we went through a buyout during that time, and I basically took the reins over for about 14 years.
Oh, wow. Congratulations, by the way, on exiting the business.
Yeah, thank you. Not easy to do coming out of COVID.
I agree. And but you accomplished it. And so now one thing, the topic that we wanted to talk about today is private lending.
That's right.
I want to find out more information about that. I'm pretty sure our listener will be very excited to learn more of how they can do it too. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is private lending to begin with?
Yeah, for sure. So private lending, at least in my situation, I usually lend to real estate investors. So that could be people that are raising money to either develop land. Sometimes they have underperforming properties that they need money to renovate. Other times they even could be business owners and they need short-term loans for their business. So the reasons that they come to, not to say just me, but borrowers in general, could be all those different reasons. A lot of the times banks don't favor entrepreneurs or investors and things like that. So it can be not only very difficult to get the money, but difficult to get it very quickly. So a lot of times people will reach out with opportunities that could range from a couple months to upwards of a year or maybe 24 months to basically satisfy the needs of the project that they're working on.
So what are some of the things that you're looking at when you're evaluating a project like that, or someone who actually reaching out and looking for private lending?
Yeah, so there could be a few different things. So a lot of times people get very nervous about the fact that they could be unsecured. So really what that means is that you're not registered on title. So sometimes people would rather see something where maybe they have a first position or second position mortgage. So basically you have the same rights and privileges as a bank. Now, the thing with that, it can be a little bit more complex to set up, and usually interest is not quite as high. So you might be looking at 8%, 9%. I think the most I've seen really is around 13% for something like that. But if it's an unsecured promissory note, then it doesn't mean that there's no leverage at all. So in most of the situations I've been involved with, when I have done those loans, there's usually always a property listed. So it's not like there's absolutely nothing at play. So it's just a different way that you would have to go through legal channels if you ended up running into any issues. So we'll do things like credit checks, double checking the insurance. So just a homeowner's insurance alone may not be good enough if they're renovating a property. Mm-hmm. So you want to take the building insurance, you want to show proof that they own the property, that they're on title. So there's certain things that you can do from a due diligence standpoint just to make sure that the property listed on that agreement that you would take a lien against if they defaulted or ran into any issues actually exists, they are on title, they do own it, and that they have everything else kind of set up and in line. And I mean, to this point, I've been doing this for 4.5 years at this point. I'm just signing off on my 57th deal in 4.5 years. So I've done quite a
few. So what are some of the things that you put in place in terms of a team or someone who wanted to do a private lending like yourself? What are the team members that you put in place and making sure that this is a good, profitable business?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I would lean on my lawyer to double check certain things just to make sure that they own the property, there was enough equity in the property. Because if they owned it, but they refinanced it a whole bunch of times, then that may not necessarily be an ideal situation. And I did walk away from a couple early on. Now that I do have my real estate license as well, I can actually do some of that due diligence for myself to make sure that, again, they are on title and just kind of see a little bit more behind the history and stuff like that. I am working with a couple of mortgage brokers that will do some of that due diligence as well. So probably about half the deals I have right now are directly through mortgage brokers that will help with some of that legwork. And then in other instances, again, I'm in a very big community of real estate investors. There's probably about 3,000 or 4,000 of us. So just through referrals and kind of through that network, there's been a lot of opportunities that have come about that way. And that could be more on the land development side and, just building those trusted relationships with people. It's not like I'm just loaning to someone like without doing any legwork and trying to figure out who they are and like what they need the money for.
And on top of that, what is a typical like loan to values or loan to cost that actually you do typical lending out to an investor?
So, I mean, I'm not really looking at the loan to value because it's not necessarily a mortgage. So if it was a mortgage, you're going to want to see obviously what that looks like. What I'm more looking at is like, what's the interest rate? What's the term length? Just again, making sure that they own the property and there is enough equity to cover things if anything went wrong. So most of the promissory notes that I've been involved with are 15 to 20% on average. Some could be interest only loans. Some have been principal and interest. And some have even been bridge loans. So for example, someone might need to clear their line of credit just so that they can close on a mortgage. So they might spend $2,000 to clear $20,000 or $5,000 to clear $35,000 for 2 weeks or 6 weeks or something like that, because the bank won't close the mortgage if they have that balance on their line of credit. So they just need kind of a quick and easy solution to cover something like that off.
So when you say quick and easy, what is a typical time frame that you usually lend out?
Yeah, I mean, the shortest has been 2 weeks. The longest has been a couple of years. And out of all the deals that I've done, the only ones that have gone like slightly sideways are a couple of syndicated mortgages that I was involved with. I set them up in 2018 and all those terms were 18, 24 months and they're a few years past the payout. So they're still paying interest, but because they're developing land, they've had some setbacks and chances are it'll pay out by the end of this year rather than a couple of years ago. But out of 57 deals, that's like 1.5. And it's not like they've defaulted. It's taking longer than expected.
So when some of the projects like that and going sideways, what's some of the things that you put in place to making sure that your fund is secure? You're talking about the first lien or second lien or something like that.
Well, it's not so much as secured, like they're still paying, like they haven't defaulted, right? So I'm still getting my interest payments every month from them. So it's not like there's been an issue in that instance. But all the other private lending that I've done over the last few years has actually paid off what I originally invested with them. So at this point, when that money comes back, it's going to be like a little nest egg because it'll be like a couple $100,000 coming back that's been like long paid off at this point in time.
Okay. And if there is a potential downturn, if you see like in the real estate market, that can be potential. If one of them is default, what's some of the ways that you can recoup those?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to basically go through legal channels to get something like that resolved. And there's always risk. I think with anything, like if you invest in the stock market, there's so much volatility and there's no leverage. So if the stock market collapses tomorrow, like there's not necessarily any recourse unless you ride it out and hopefully things go up. I think what I've really liked about this model of investing is the fact there is always a property involved in some kind. Right. And for me, I've tried to insulate my risk just by diversifying. So right now I have probably 17 different people that I'm working with. So if one of those goes wrong, it's not like all of them. It's kind of like having a single family home compared to an apartment building. Yep. Well, if you have one vacancy in an apartment building, it's not going to kill you. If you have vacancy in a single family home, that could be a lot more challenging, right? So that's what I've kind of approached.
Got it. That makes sense. And then the interest or the principal and interest that you're actually receiving back, I just want to talk about on the taxing side. How is being taxed primarily?
Yeah, so it's basically for me because I'm using my home equity line of credit. So I'm taking that money personally. So you would deduct your interest. So that's tax deductible. So last year I paid about 20,000 in HELOC interest. So your income is after that's considered, and then it's just whatever your income tax rate would be in that sense.
Okay.
So for me, like I'll be sitting around probably 20% tax based on any of those earnings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also have some like in a business as well. So it just, trying to diversify a little bit there as well.
That makes sense. And you're working about with 16, 17, 18 people in your group right now. And but you also have about 3,000 people in your network. How do you choose, like the investor or someone who's coming to work with you? How do you choose that this is the right person I want to work with and I trust this person, I'm going to lend my money to this person?
Yeah, I mean, so for the land developers, for example, like I got a list from someone in my network and she said, I've sold all my properties. I'm just doing private lending because the cash flow is so much better and it's easier. Like it's just, you put the money there and you collect money every month. So she gave me a list of all the people she'd been working with. And I just set up calls with all of them to understand what the project was all about and see how comfortable I was working with them. Mm-hmm. And in some instances, there was people I didn't feel comfortable with. Like they seemed really disorganized. They just didn't, you kind of trust your instincts in some ways. And then for these particular people as well, they'll show like regular updates for their investors. So they'll show video footage of the property and like what they're working on. And there's regular updates in that sense. So they send things out by email. They also have Facebook groups. So you can actually see how it's going. For one of the mortgage brokers, they actually take accountability in the sense that if someone is late on a payment, in some cases, they've actually issued the payment and then they'll deal with the borrower and getting it resolved. So it doesn't mean that that's a perfect system, but they do take accountability if there is any delays or anything kind of goes not according to plan.
Got it. That makes sense. And do you foresee that nowadays, like because of the market situation, do you foresee that the private lending is a sustainable business going through the 2023?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if anything, there are so many deals. Like I don't have enough money to support it, but I have so many now that I'm just sending them along to other people that are not necessarily part of the network that aren't seeing them, because there's literally so many people, and sometimes they're buying properties that are underperforming and they're renovating. So there's so many active partners that are doing different things that if anything, I'm just like, I could be doing 10 deals a week if I wanted, you know what I mean? So I think there's always going to be people that are entrepreneurial, they're active, they're trying to raise that money. So I don't see that necessarily going away.
Got it. So you mentioned something about like if you have a deals and then you also send it along to your network. How does that process work? Are they coming and invest with you, or you basically have that person actually invested in the deal themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like a private lending business. Maybe it might be something that I entertain at some point in time just because I've done so much of it. But because I've done podcasts like this, it feels like anytime that I do one, and then people will kind of be like, hey, I want to do this. And they'll reach out and I'll usually have a call with them. I'll explain a little bit about how I handle it. And then I'm like, I'm happy to just send things up to you. Like as people reach out to me, if I can't do it myself, then I can at least pass it along. So I pretty much just started building up a database of the people that have an interest in this. They kind of want to see the deal flow and see what there is. And then it's up to them to do their own due diligence. I'll make the introduction and then they can, understand more about what the opportunity is. And then at that point, it's in their hands. Like I'm not really making money off of it. Like
Got it.
In some instances, companies might offer a referral fee if it does lead to, someone lending with them and things like that. But for the most part, I've just been forwarding things along.
Got it. That makes sense. And then if somebody really wanted to do something like this, what is your recommendation of a typical loan or lending? How much do you think that they should be starting out with? Like we don't want to go and chasing $1 million like lending or something like that. But what is the typical you think that the best practice? Yeah.
So for me, my general comfort level is no more than 50,000 per deal. And I might even invest 100,000 with the same person, but on two separate properties or two separate projects so that I can insulate my risk a little bit better. I generally don't do any more than that kind of per person or per project. I mean, it doesn't mean that people don't. Like sometimes people might drop 500,000 or 100,000, but I'd rather have $1 million split between like 25 projects than 1 million in one, because if anything goes wrong, that's everything that you have, right? So that's my personal approach. again, going back to the syndicated mortgages, I did a lot more with them. I think I did about 350,000 across 3 deals. And then now, like, as a result, like, all these things have been tied up, and then that's a larger amount of money that's tied up. So at least this way I feel more comfortable knowing that if it's, 50,000 and there's a delay, it's only like a very small percentage of my total amount that I have out.
Well, you speak one word that actually caught my attention, syndicated mortgages. So for us, we are also syndicators, but we usually syndicate the equity, and where we're working with the bank and getting the debts or financing side. So how does the syndicate mortgages work? Is it just like what you just mentioned? Can you elaborate on that?
The investment community that I'm part of, they really advocated for this one particular company when I joined them. And I think that they really misrepresented themselves. Like, I thought they were actually a brokerage that was brokering deals for people that were buying large apartment buildings, shopping centers, and things like that. So we were like one of many investors kind of supporting a group mortgage. So that was my understanding when I did it. What I learned later was that they're actually land developers. So that's a big reason why things have been delayed. So for example, one of the projects, they sounded like things were moving along finally. They had their Terry on registration, and then at the end of last year, they said, oh, actually, they've decided they have to go back to site plan approval. They want to start from scratch. They need another 2 years. And it's like, well, we're already like 5 years into it at this point. Like, it's just a bit ridiculous. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of came out later that really wasn't, I don't think, disclosed properly to everyone. So I'm not the only investor. There's hundreds of us that are kind of all in the same situation. And the company generally has done good work, but they're known and prone apparently to delays, which I found out after the fact. So they're raising that money to develop the land and kind of get it to a certain phase. And then once they start building, then I guess they'd pay out us as the first round of investors and then bring in whatever money that they require afterwards. So it's not the majority of what I've done. Like, out of 57, that's only 3 deals. Everything else that I've done has been more like the promissory notes, or it could be like a GP-LP structure. So for a conversion project I'm part of, it's like general partner, limited partner. So it's a little bit different in that sense and a bit more secure. But again, that's probably a little bit more complicated from a legal perspective and more expensive. Like, those contracts are like 100 pages long, where a GSA or a promissory note's 3 pages. So that's why probably not the average person is like going that route in most cases. But if they do have larger projects, then that might be how it's set up.
That makes sense. And are you still doing long-term and short-term rental at the moment?
Not at the moment. Basically, what I sold my last property last spring, and I was going to buy. I actually put in an offer on a package of properties, which was 22 units across 6 properties, and it didn't work out. So I basically dumped my down payment into some private loans for a year, thinking that, let's just see where the market lands. Like, rates were going up, prices were going down, and that way my money's still working for me. And then ideally I'm going to regroup. I'll probably look at going into multifamily, and I'm also entertaining some short-term rentals in Arizona.
Got it. Yeah, Arizona is one of the best markets here in the United States. So yes, and Serena, is there anything else with the private lendings that our listeners should know that I haven't asked?
Yeah, I think, everyone comes across different. For me, I was able to pay off my home mortgage 5 years ago. So that's what opened up like a very big home equity line of credit. So for me, like, I use that money, and again, I diversify it, but the rates were only around 3%. They've obviously gone up a lot in the last year. The chances are they'll come down again soon. But if you're making 17%, even less than 7% now, you're profiting the 10. So I'm just using some of the money that I have available to me. It's not like I just had $1 million in cash sitting around. I was obviously able to access some of the equity in my home. So for me, I started out small. Like, I started out on the private lending side with maybe 100 to 150,000. And then the syndicated mortgages were their own kind of category, I guess you could say. And then as time has passed, I've gotten more comfortable and diversified my relationships and stuff like that. So now I've got a lot more out there working for me. So I think you just have to do what you're comfortable with. Try to get to know as many people as possible. Like, do your due diligence. That's super important. And then ideally you want your money working for you, right? Like, if it's just sitting in the bank, then that's not helping you at all.
That makes sense. And so finally, I want to ask some questions about your book. So I was checking out your book, and I just want to ask, like, what inspired you to start writing your book?
So my childhood was kind of crazy, which you might have gathered from reading a little bit about it. But I think just growing up, everyone was always like, you have to write a book. Like, your life's been so crazy. So it started with that. And then I literally kind of fell into entrepreneurship. So obviously, when you run your own business, there's a lot of things that happen and a lot of lessons and, life is interweaving with that and stuff like that. So I just felt like it was something I felt compelled to do. And I joined a workshop in 2018 and I wrote probably 2/3 of it there, finished the book after, and then I just hit a wall. Like I didn't know how to publish it. So I put it on the back burner for a while. And then when COVID happened, I was like, you know what, I'm going to get serious about publishing it. So I found a publisher, went through rounds of editing, and it took maybe about like 8 or 9 months. And then I finally had it completed to be able to release.
That's amazing. And another question I asked, I want to go back to your original story. You mentioned that you took over the company and the original owners was there for only 4 years and she left and you took over the company. So I want to ask, like at the times, I would assume you just started your career as well. And what gave you the courage to take on a business? I mean, that's a big step. And what gives you the courage to do that? And how do you know for sure that you can do it?
Yeah, I mean, at that point in time, like I was brought in primarily for operations. So my business partner was the face of the company. So sales, recruiting and talent and things like that. And then I dealt with, scheduling, planning, payroll, like all the stuff on the back end. And we had done a lot of work in 4 years already. And it felt like we'd already built up a certain reputation with some larger companies. Like we were working with a couple of large telecom companies and had some stable, consistent clients. And basically my options were we could either take what's in the bank and walk away. So that would be, not a ton of money, or I could potentially partner with another company, but they would have half of my business and I would have nothing of theirs. So it didn't feel like a fair merger. Like it would be like becoming an employee. And then the other option is that I could buy her out. So at that point in time, they basically just took, what was in the bank account at the end of the year, multiplied it by 3 and then divided it by 2 because we were 50-50 owners. So to buy her out it wasn't an insignificant amount of money, but it was something that I could pay her out over a period of time. I think altogether it was over 2 years just to kind of stagger it out. So she didn't have a big tax impact. I didn't have to struggle in that sense. And it just felt like I didn't want to throw away what I'd already worked so hard to build. So I just took a chance and thankfully things worked out.
I'm pretty sure it's not just taking a chance by yourself. It's combination of a lot of hard work, and especially as an entrepreneur, I'm pretty sure you're putting possibly like 80 hours a week, making sure that your company succeeds. Plenty
of those weeks over the years, especially for 10 years. Like that was probably the hardest. And then once I got to the point where I was starting to delegate, hired a bookkeeper, like starting to split things out, and then it started to, gain some of my time back and that life balance a little bit better.
So for our listeners who are also entrepreneurs and or wanted to start a business, do you have any tips or recommendation for them, making sure that they become a good leader in their business and pushing forward?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Like I talk about in my book how someone sat us down to talk about search engine optimization, like a year into the business. We were kind of like, we're fine. Like we didn't know anything about it. And for our business, it really didn't matter where we are. It's more like you want to be available for people to find you. So if people are looking up Toronto event staffing or Calgary brand ambassadors, like you want to be accessible. And because of the SEO that we started doing 8 years after that, we had worked with companies all over the United States, Greece. Like I literally went to Athens and had dinner with a client there, the government of South Australia, like, companies from the UK, so all over. And it was because they could find us online. So looking back, that was a big regret that I didn't start doing that sooner. And it doesn't mean that works for every business. Like if you're opening up a pizza shop, SEO probably doesn't matter. It's going to be location, right? So just understanding where your clients are going to find you, I think was super important. And then also understanding like just getting mentorship. Like I was winging it for the first 8 years. And then I hired a business coach that encouraged me to invest some of the money I had retained in the business. So you have to understand, like, no one teaches you how to run a business. Like you are literally figuring it out as you go. And if I've learned anything, there's just ways to get where you want to go faster. So you might as well try to lean on people or find those connections that can help you. So I found a business coach initially, then I joined a mentorship program. And then from there, like had probably a few more afterwards. But through that, that's how I was able to really understand like the value of outsourcing my bookkeeping. Like I was wasting 2 days a week on it. So if I could have someone else do it, I could put that time into sales and then we could grow. So when we started doing that and then also doing the SEO, like our sales went up incredibly high at that point.
That makes sense. And thank you so much for sharing your story regarding, starting the business and the courage to start it, and also the operation side and making sure that the business is running smoothly. And it's very rare to find someone who actually coming on a podcast who actually exited of a business. So
Yeah.
I want to take this opportunity and ask you as well for our listeners. So what are some of the things that you consider before you actually exit your business, and what's some of the things that you have to watch out for when you exit, and some of the lessons that you learn from that?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I was actually pregnant with my daughter kind of towards the end of 2018, and I was grooming someone in my business that I'd had for about 6 years to take over while I took a step back. And then she resigned when my daughter was just 2 months old. So that's really what prompted me to list the business for sale. So I hired a mergers and acquisitions company, and at that point I had 10 people full time. I had thousands part time. Like I just didn't feel like I could run that on my own without having someone I really trusted in that position. So they valued the business. They started, reaching out to possible buyers, and then we went into lockdown. So good luck selling an events business during a pandemic. So it was really unfortunate because I felt like that particular key employee, had she been honest with me that she didn't intend to necessarily stick out another year, I probably would have sold it before I had my daughter, and it would have been a lot easier and smooth. But it is what it is. We came through the 2 years for the pandemic, and then the one girl that I kept throughout cut my team back just to save money, but she ended up resigning for another opportunity at the beginning of last year. And I basically said to the mergers acquisitions company, like, you guys have had 2 years to sell it. You haven't. And at this point, my back's against the wall. Like, I don't feel like I can scale it up on my own to where we were without appropriate support. And at this point, I have no office anymore. The only thing of value is really the website. So I got their permission to have a mutual release and then try to find a company to take that step over. I reached out to about 15 agencies that I felt like would be aligned with the kinds of opportunities and leads that we had coming in through our website. And I ended up getting about 4 deals, and I had it locked down literally in 2 weeks. And then we closed 2 weeks after that. So everything happened like very, very fast because, again, I lost my key employee. And at this point, like, we'd been on this roller coaster of lockdowns and stuff like that. And I just knew, like, we're going to get busy fast coming out of COVID. And like, I can't do this on my own. So I was trying to find a company that could take it over very, very quickly and just hit the ground running.
That makes sense. And basically knowing your personal situations and also knowing your business situation and like foreseeing the future, how it looks like and how it makes sense. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, ideally a company that's already doing what you're doing can assimilate those opportunities a lot more easily than someone's just walking in like, I want to have a business that has no experience, right? So it's easier in that sense. I think some of the larger companies, maybe they were worried about the timeline to take things over. And maybe they also didn't see the value behind the SEO and everything that we had already built with regards to leads coming in and stuff like that, and how they could turn that into something really valuable. But I mean, the company did very, very well that did take over last year, and I'm still indirectly involved and still kind of a part of certain things. But I think it made sense to just find a company that's already doing what you're doing because they can take it over. So
that makes sense. And Serena, so what is next for you from here?
Yeah, so I obviously got my real estate license. So I'm working with clients now, but I'm also looking to my next investment. So ideally, again, multifamily is attractive. Short-term rentals, potentially, again, Arizona, maybe even Orlando or something like that. So I'm trying to decide my next move, but I have private lending to support my lifestyle in the meantime. So it's not like I necessarily have to race to get these things figured out.
So another question to follow up on that. So how has investing as a private lender changed your life so far or impacted your life so far?
Yeah, I mean, I've been living off it for a few years at this point in time. The year before I had my daughter, I was able to cut my pay back from my business by half because I wanted to, leave as much retained earnings in the business as I could while I was going on mat leave. And then with COVID happening, I stopped taking money out altogether. So for a couple of years there, I didn't take out anything personally at all. But all the money I had coming in from private lending ended up being fine. And then even last year, was probably a record year for me. I made probably more than twice as much as I ever did from my highest year in my business. So I was able to make that kind of money, and I was only really working here and there. Like I was working only part-time as a realtor, and it wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't been doing all this private lending. So
So Serena, what is one thing that you can share with our listeners to making sure that setting them to a successful path, either as an entrepreneur or as a private lender or as an investor?
Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with the quote that your net worth is based on your network.
Yes.
So I think for me, like just getting to know as many people as possible and again, learning from people that have been there and utilizing their network. And people are generally pretty generous with their time, right? Like if you're like, hey, I just have some questions about something. Can we jump on a call for half an hour? Like we share resources and things like that. So I think finding the right community to surround yourself with, whether you're an entrepreneur or an investor, like I think those things can be a little bit connected, but it's helpful to try to learn from others that are in the same situation that you are, because it can be really lonely as a business owner. Like you can't go to your employees and ask them questions about certain things because you're the one that's supposed to have all the answers, right? So it's almost like having the right support system in place no matter what you're doing, because otherwise it can be very difficult and you're just going to struggle unnecessarily.
Wow, that golden nuggets right there is having the support and having the system in place. So thank you so much, Serena. And I really appreciate you coming on today to the podcast and talk to me about your journey as an entrepreneur and real estate investing and also private lending, and also talking to me about your book and especially giving us a lot of golden nuggets and tips and recommendations of how to get into it. So if our listener wanted to find out more about you or wanted to connect with you, where can they go?
Yeah. So on the real estate side, I have profiles set up under Serena Holmes Realtor. And then for my book, so for anything more to do with like entrepreneurship and inspiration, I have other profiles under Serena Holmes Author.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Serena.
Great. Thank you.
And thank you for listening to our podcast today, brought to you by Bonavest Capital. We would really appreciate it if you can go to iTunes right now and leave a rating and written review. Also, please don't forget to subscribe so you can always get the latest episodes. You can also connect with us on Facebook, How Did They Do It Real Estate. We'd love to hear your feedback and any topics that you're interested in for future episodes. Lastly, to learn more about us, you can go to bonavestcapital.com and fill out the Contact Us page so you can speak to us directly. Nothing on the show should be considered as specific personal advice. Please consult your legal, tax, and real estate professionals for individualized advice.